Welcome to another fine video in my Intro to HTML web video series. In this video I want to talk about putting it all together. So far we've gotten a lot of building blocks that'll lead us to doing a kind of a nice single column blog type layout, but we really haven't talked anything about design or what's going to look good and what's not going to look good. So in this video I want to talk about cleaning it up, putting it together. Some of the topics I'm going to talk about is handling text. I want to talk about things like margins. I want to talk about centering. I want to talk about white space. I want to talk about color schemes. This is going to be quite a bit, and it might actually get broken up into two videos. Not sure yet. We'll see. So I want to start off talking about something called white space. White space is the area in our document where we don't have anything, like this area on the right side of the figure and fig caption. We have this big blank area that's called white space. These areas in between text and the figure, white space. These spaces in between our paragraphs, white space. These areas in between these two articles, white space. Yes, I know it's black or it's silver, but it's called white space. We want to control the white space to make things look good. So what actually is good and what is actually bad for white space? Well, the first rule of thumb that I'm going to tell you is never have content touching the edge of a box. Right now, all of our white space is set up such that we have absolutely no space in between the edges of our paragraphs and the edges of our containing boxes. That's bad. It creates a really cramped layout. Other things that I really don't like is when I've got these different containers. Each one has its own background color, and I see a space in between them. I do not like that white space. It really starts to break up the vertical flow of the document. So let's try and tighten things up a bit. The first thing that we can do, now this is the first thing I usually do when designing a web page, and you can choose to do this as well. I use this thing and then create a rule based on this thing. Margin 0. Padding 0. So margin 0, padding 0, and then this thingamajig. Let's see what it does before I describe it. Took all margins and padding out of anything unless it was set otherwise. So it closed up all of those gaps in between our divs, which is kind of nice, but it also took away any kind of white space in between the edges of our content and the edges of our boxes. So now we need to start inserting some white space where we want it. The reason I do this is it allows us to have absolute control over how we want the white space to show up. I don't want to rely on some defaults that different browsers put in, because different browsers put in different defaults for white space. So let's control that white space. First thing we want to do is have a little bit of padding in between the edges of our articles and the edges of the content in our articles. So let's try this. So find article. Get a little bit of padding in there. And let's use a relative size. I'm going to start with 2% and see how that looks. Just see how it feels. Okay, so I've got a little bit of space right here that pushes the content away from the edges of the boxes. That feels just a little bit more open. It feels less claustrophobic. I like that. I'm going to keep it at 2% for now. If we look at some of the other white space that would be kind of nice to have, it would be nice to have some white space that's going to tell us where a paragraph begins and ends. That would be good. So let's add some of that in there. In fact, I think I'm just going to put some white space at the bottom of each paragraph. So I'm going to make a new style rule for paragraph. Margin bottom, and put a little white space down there. I'm going to make it 2%. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so that spaces it out quite a bit, but we almost have too much of a space there. The 2% looked good over here, but down here, that's a little too much. So maybe I'll set it at 1.5. There, that tightens it up just a little bit. Okay, so now we clearly have breaks in our paragraphs. That's nice. Now, our headings also need to have some white space. Okay, so I'm going to, hey, look at that. I'm going to take one of those out of there. H1. Now, you know, I'm going to do it this way because I want them to have the same white space. I haven't talked about this yet, but this is selecting multiple elements at the same time. I've selected H1s, H2s, and H3s, and I'm going to apply one rule to each of those. This is a shortcut. Instead of making 3 separate style rules, I'll make one style rule that will select all 3 of them. And I'm going to give them some margin on the bottom. So I'll just copy this. And I'll keep it at 1.5 and see if I like it. That spaces it out kind of nicely, but it's almost too much. Let's go a little bit smaller. 1.25. Tighten it up. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, this isn't absolutely the way that you need to do it. I'm just showing you how things can be done. You set up your white space however you feel you need to set up your white space. Now, it looks like I've got a little bit of problem. I've got some squishiness up here. I want some white space in between the bottom of my figure and the top of my H2. So figure needs some white space. So I'm going to have a margin bottom on it. And I'll start at 1.25, see how it looks. There we go, that's good. It gives us just a little bit of breathing room there. Now, some of the areas where I think I could use some more white space. I think there needs to be some padding in the header and some padding in the footer. So I'm going to start with 2% padding in each of them. Copy that. I'm just spacing these things out so it's easier to read. Excuse me. Save it. Refresh it. Now I've got a little bit, that's too much up there, don't you think? That white space there is way too much. If I look at the, oops, I didn't add it in the footer. Where did I add it? I added it in the article. I don't want that there. Add it in the footer. Thank you for pointing that out. I make mistakes sometimes. So instead of having it in the article, I have it in the footer. So get that padding out of there. Oops. So there's some in the footer. Oops, I needed some padding in the article as well. There we go. I did want padding in the article. There we go. Now it looks the way it should look. I've got some padding, a little too much padding in the header, so I'll take some out. What do I say? Go down to maybe like 1.5. Check it. There. Some padding in the header, some padding in the articles, some white space down below everything. That all looks good. And some down there. So that's controlling white space. Let's move on. I want to talk a little bit about color. So if this is going to be a website, let's say this is my death metal album review blog. I'll call it all things spooky or all things dark. Yeah, that was my evil laugh. Okay, but this color scheme doesn't work for all things dark, right? I've got this yellow, I've got this blue, I've got this silver. The black, yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Maybe the whole background of the body is going to be black. But then I want to think about the different colors for the rest of it. I want to keep an overall dark color scheme. There's this cool website that helps you design color schemes. It's called Color Scheme Designer. It allows you to choose different types of color schemes: mono, complement, triad, tetrad, analogic, and accented analogic. I'm not going to go into describing what they are, but you can kind of poke around with this. It allows us to first choose the hues that we want to use. If I want to do death metal, I'll probably get some red in there. That'd be really cool. I want to adjust the scheme a little bit. I'm going to get out of the pink range here, go more towards there. Adjust the scheme, and you can move these little sliders around to determine the brightness and contrast of it until it looks right. You can adjust variance and change which colors you want them to be. Okay, and then you just poke around here until you get a color scheme that you like. Once you get it you like it, you can move down to your color list. I kind of like this. Generally, for a color scheme for web design, you want to limit it to about 5 different colors. I encourage you to poke around on this web page and just sort of figure out how things work and design a color scheme that works for you. Once you have one, you can actually preview them. Look at light page example and dark page example, death metal, dark page example. Ooh, that looks nice. I kind of like that. Except the pink. I'm not going to work the pink or the green in it. But I like this dark red here for the header. I like the black back here. I like the white here. I like the white in the nav. So that's how I'm going to do it. My text is going to be light. My backgrounds are going to be dark. So the colors I need this color, FF3100. So I'll copy this. And I'm going to start with background color of the header of that color. So background color is going to be, instead of gold, FF3100. Now, if you want to use one of these types of things, this is called hexadecimal, you need to have the number symbol before it. Number symbol FF3100. Save it. Go to the browser and refresh it. Oh yeah, that's nice. My nav, I'm going to go with, let's see. I'm going to go with the dark brown for the nav. So it's this color, 4D2800. So find nav. Save it. Refresh it. Yeah, that's good. The background for this area here, I'm going to go with the dark brown, which is this one, 0D0200. Copy it, and I need to put this in the article. Save it. Refresh it. Nice. And then for the footer, I'm going to make it that red, the same as the header. And then save it. Alright, so this is a good start. I'm going to stop here, and then I'm going to move on to another video where I'll talk about changing the text, changing the color and the font size and all that stuff with text. We've covered white space, we've covered background colors. Now we'll move on to text.